The kids, they are not soaking it in because they didn't have to go through what my mom had to go through. Today's kids is hand to them on a silver platter. And it's, back then when my mom and the other kids went here, as my mom stated to you all, they had to do chores. These kids today, they jump on the school bus and off the school bus at home in a video game. My mom, and before they left, they had to have this school clean for the next day. Kids doesn't do that today. And but like I said, if we continue to keep this open, then have tours and let children know about the real history of school and how black kids had to struggle just to get the education. See, education now is put in their hands, and some of them is not even trying to get that today. But hopefully it will sink in one day with them.
I came here one time. I've came here many times before. I think the youngest is probably like 10. And I remember them having a heater in here, and I was wondering, why do they have a heater in here? Because the school never had heat or AC, so during the winter they would sit in here bundled up with jackets because they never had heat, or in the summer they were really hot because there was no AC in here. And then I remember hearing a story about they had a pail and it had water in it, and they kept it in there overnight, and when they came back it was frozen, and so they couldn't have water for the next day. And I also heard about a story how they had to go to the bathrooms outside. And I just can't imagine doing that during the winter, and it's freezing cold, and yeah. I heard about it because my grandmother, I'm pretty sure she went here, and she told me the stories about the pail and the outhouse, going outside to use the bathroom. And yeah, I feel like I wouldn't personally be able to do it. And a lot of credit for them for doing it.
I wasn't old enough to attend this school, but like I said, we have 3 young ladies left in our school now that actually attended this school. And just the history of it, and knowing that this is where our people in the community got their start. And you can see it was a 2-room school. And I don't remember how many grades that was here, but we had one fellow that attended the school. He's passed about 3 years ago. And I used to hear him talk about how they used to come and have to get wood for the heater, wood heater in the school, and they had the outside restrooms, and they had to come and build fires, in the wintertime. And just to hear him talk about it, that brought joy to me.
So I will tell you that I was ignorant to the history of this school, having been in Durham for such a long time. I'm not a native of Durham, but didn't realize that these schools even existed so close to where I live. I was really shocked, and so I just dove right in. When they asked me to be on the board, I was super excited, and it was like a sponge trying to learn everything. And just the thought of understanding that here students who had to walk so far to come get an education, be in a room of different grades, learning things, and we take that for granted these days, and to come into a school that had no heat and no air, it was heated by just a stove in the room, I can't even fathom. And you hear the stories, I've heard the stories of my grandparents telling me these stories, but this was actually walking into the space and seeing it for the first time, like really taking it in. And it was humbling, it was eye-opening, and I have a teenager now, and I make sure he comes to see just how privileged we are in 2020 plus, and just to understand that this is where we came from, this is our history, and I feel very privileged to be on this board. I have a teenager who goes to school here locally in Durham, and when I first brought him to the space, he's such an intuitive child. So when he first walked in, he was very curious. He said, "They really had classes here?" And I said, "Yes, they really had classes here." And he couldn't understand, there's no technology in this space. It's just original dry chalkboard behind me, and just that concept. And he's seen a chalkboard before, but they doodled on it. They didn't think of anything. There aren't books. There were no books. Or, there are no tablets here for them to use and things like that. And I think when he first came here, it was in the summer, so he didn't have the concept that this is a cold building. And then when he came back the second time, he thought, well, when are they going to turn the heat on? And I said, that's not an option. That's not an option. You have to sit here very cold until the stove heats up the space and still concentrate. And so my son just had this wow. And I said, and here's the fascinating fact, that there are people still alive today who remember this, who lived this. This is not 200 or 300 years ago, This is still very, present. This is part of the present. It's not the history yet, and these people are here. And, he got to meet some of the original members or some of the members who are still alive. And, he just couldn't fathom it. It was just so I want him to come into the space as often so he can understand and he can be respectful of not just the education, but the desire to learn was here. The neat thing about this space and learning it from my perspective, not being someone who actually went to school here, but learning it. I come from a very little town on the coast of North Carolina, and I've seen spaces like this growing up, of course, in buildings that didn't have heat and air growing up. That wasn't unusual. But to come in this space and see, and what strikes me the most is that they're still students who are still alive. That was my biggest shocking moment, to be able to sit and hear them speak from a personal perspective was so, at first it made me so sad that they had to go through so much just to get an education. And then just the drive that they would do chores in the morning, they were, work on a farm, come here and still go back and do all those things. And it inspires me, because this is when I think, oh, okay, I don't want to do this, or I'm tired. Here's a person who didn't have that option, and they still wanted to do it. They wanted to be here, and they wanted to learn. And so many times we take that for granted. And coming in from a different city and not knowing as much, it really spoke to my heart as a person of color to say, I don't know everything I know about my own history. And what an eye-opening experience. And here are these two men who got together in the 20s and said, we want to start these schools all over and bring education when it wasn't available. It's shocking. It's shocking.
I think it's important to know that, to learn that how the children's, where we come from and how we operated and made it. And I think that's very important to what we have now, because now they have everything, but we didn't have that. We didn't have gyms, auditorium. We didn't have, what else we didn't have? I said gyms, didn't I? Yeah, we didn't have things like they have now. And that's why I think it's very important.
Again, I've only been here for the past 11 years. So I became the pastor of Cames Chapel in January of 2011. And I was immersed immediately in this facility that the church owned, that I had no idea at the time what it was really all about. It was amazing to me that some of our very members, some of the members of our church, actually attended the school back when it was an educational center for students. This is where they learned math. This is where they learned English. This is where they studied about those types of topics. And to hear them tell their stories about what it was like back in those days, being in a 2-room school, and thinking about the books that they had. And then, consequently, thinking about my own education and the opportunities that were presented to me, it really was humbling to hear about how people got their start.
It was an epiphany to me that we have this gym, and I want everybody to know about it. And I want everybody to, I have a personal private tour we have scheduled on Friday, and it is in regards to a graduate student that wants to do their thesis on the school. And I told her, no, you have to come to the school. And so when you step into the school, you can feel the aura, you can feel the ancestors, and you can feel the resilience that they had during this time. Otherwise, they wouldn't have had the ability to have some type of formalized education. So that's why it's really important to me. I will never know the things that they were enduring just to get to school. And also I want the young people to know that they valued their education. So it wasn't a matter of saying, I don't like this teacher, I don't like going to school. They valued the education that they had and the opportunity. So I think that's really important for our history. To know that these individuals sacrificed so much. We have one of the most pristine schools still standing because of our ancestors, because they saw that this is something that is worth saving, and then making sure that we have that legacy that they worked so hard to keep.
This was not taught in the schools, and that's why I think it's very important for us now to kind of relay the information to our current schools now. It's interesting interlude where they can find out about the past, how education was done in the past compared to how it's done in the future. I think if they can understand the sacrifices and all of the obstacles that the students had to overcome in order to get an education back then, I think they can really appreciate the opportunities that they have now today.